Welcome to section 4 of the Vintage Florals blanket. You've probably guessed by now that we're going to be doing a section of granny stripes again, and this time there's a little difference in the middle. We've got a few rounds of simple granny stripes first of all, and then we have this really cute round of bobble stitch and then some more granny stripes. So let's get on with the tutorial. Check your stitch marker is on the front and flip your blanket because you're going to be working on the wrong side. Now you'll be quite an expert at making the granny stripes after doing section 2, so I'm not going to spend too long on this. I'm just going to do a little bit and then I'll come back when I'm finished my round of graphite plus my other rounds of cream and we're ready to start the next bit. But I'm going to just start you off just now. This is back to treble stitch, double crochet in US terms. Remember, I only use the half treble for making the joining stitch, so we're back to doing granny clusters in treble stitch. If I can just get this started, here we go. So I'm chaining 2 and 2 trebles in the corner, and that first chain 2 is the equivalent of the first treble, and then into the next space and treble 3, and the next space. I just want to take you over to the join and remind you what to do, and then I'll leave you to do it all by yourself. So I have one more cluster of 3 trebles to make before we get to the part where the 2 squares are butted together. So you can see what I've done there, and I'm now at this part, which, if you'll remember, we need to make a cluster of 3 treble crochets but sitting on top of the join. So what we do is we go into the first corner and make 1 treble stitch, and then we go into the same corner and start a second treble stitch, but we leave it with 2 loops on the hook. We yarn over and we go into the second corner and we've got 4 loops on the hook, pull through 2, pull through 2, pull through 2, and that's us done a treble 2, start again, treble 2 together, and then we finish off with 1 more treble stitch, and that's how we put our cluster of treble stitches over the top of that join, and then continue. So you'll work all the way around the blanket with the batik graphite, and remembering to do that in each of the joins. Treble 3, chain 2, treble 3 in each of the corners. When you come back to this first corner, you'll finish it off by treble 3, chain 2 and slip stitch into the top of the first chain 2. So that's how you would make the first round. When you're going to start the next round, which is in cream, you would flip the blanket once more so that you will be on the front side of the blanket. You'll do exactly the same thing, make the round in treble crochets but in the cream, and then you won't need to finish off your yarn at the end of that round because you'll just need to chain 2 and turn it ready to start the next round, because I think we have 3 rounds of cream to make. I'll come back when I've done that and we'll move on to the next part. I've just jumped back on here because it has occurred to me as I've been working along this edge that I may have made a little mistake when I've been telling you what to do with this join. I don't think it makes a big difference, but as I was working, my muscle memory kicked in. You know, I was actually working along here without thinking. Thinking is not a good idea sometimes. So I was working without thinking, and I realised that I was actually making my treble 2 together very slightly different from the way that I explained at the beginning. So I'm going to show you what I mean now. So here we are, another join. So I've put in my treble 1 and then start my next treble and leave it with the 2, and then go into the next corner, and I've got the 4 loops on the hook, pull through 2, 3 loops on the hook. Now what I'd said to do was then pull through 2 and pull through 2, but my muscle memory kicked in and I pulled through all 3 loops as I was working there just now. So I think that is possibly the way to go. So you would start your first treble, leave 2 loops on the hook, move over, and yarn over, insert your hook, pull it through, you'll have 4 loops, yarn over, pull through 2 loops, and then yarn over and pull through the 3 loops that are left. Now I'm going to compare it with the first one I did, and I actually don't think there's a big deal of difference, but in fact there isn't really any difference at all visually between the two. So you can do it either way. You can do it the way I started doing it, which is with the 2 loops on the hook, go into the next corner, yarn over, pull through a loop, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. But I don't think it makes any difference either way. So carry on. I've just finished going round with the graphite round that first edge after the squares, and now I'm doing cream. And like I said before, I've turned the blanket so it's now right side up, and this is the cream round. I think there are 2 more cream rounds after this one. I just wanted to remind you that when you come to the bit where the cluster has been made in the previous round over the top of the join, that you just treat it as one cluster, because there is sometimes a chance that you might forget and think it's 2 clusters and put your hook into this bit, and you don't want to do that because this is one cluster. It's just got 3 stitches showing along the top, so you work straight over and into the next space after that cluster. You can see that. I haven't actually counted. I'm going to come back in a second. I'm going to do my count to do exactly how many of the clusters there should be for the graphite and then for the next 3 rounds. So I'll do that and pop back on again. And yeah, I'm going to work round with this. It's working up very fast. I'm really pleased with the way it's working up. And I'll be back on in a minute with the proper stitch count, although it will be in the pattern as well. So the graphite round has got 37 clusters between, including the corner one, along each side. So it will increase by 1 each time. So the first round of cream will be 38, the second round 39, third round 40. Round 1 of my 3 rounds of cream granny stripe is finished, and I've chained 2, of course, as usual. Yeah, because you don't finish off. We've got 3 rounds of granny stripe in the one colour, so you don't fasten off. I just chain 2, and time to flip the blanket over, turn it, and like you did when you were making this round of the squares, your chain 2 appears at the extreme right side of the corner. So that will be the first treble stitch, and I'm going to make the entire corner. So that's 1, 2 trebles, and then 2 chains, and then 3 trebles in the corner. 1, 2, 3. So you'll need to remember, of course, that when you've gone all the way round, you finish off in this stitch. You don't do any more trebles in that corner. So I'll come back when I've got to this point, because we start round 3 very slightly differently. I'll see you then. I've just finished the second round of the cream, and again I'm not going to fasten it off, because we're using the same colour for the next round, but I just wanted to show you what happens. I'll take this back, because remember when I was speaking to you last, I had chain 2 from the previous round, and that had come right at the extreme right of the corner. So I made a complete corner with the 2 lots of treble crochets, I can't get my words out tonight, the 2 clusters of treble stitch, and I've now come all the way round, and I am going to slip stitch into the top of the first chain 2 to finish off my round, and then I'm going to chain 2 and, as usual, turn the blanket to the other side. Now this time I'm not anywhere near the corner, so I'm not going to start my round in the corner. Instead, my nearest space to the chain 2 is the first space after the corner. So I'm going to do 2 treble crochets in that space, because the first chain 2 counts as the first treble, and I'll work all the way round, and then when I come to the last corner I'll make it up as normal, 3 treble crochets, 2 chains, 3 treble crochets, and then I can slip stitch into the top of the first chain 2 to finish off. So for the third round, my first cluster is not in the corner, it's in the space immediately to the left of that corner. Okay, so we've got 3 rounds of the granny stripe done in the cream, and all finished off, and I've turned the blanket again, so we're on the wrong side this time. And what we're going to do now is something a little bit different. So we're going to do a section of bobble stitch, which is just being put in to show off the beauty of the James C. Brett Stonewash variegated yarn, because the bobbles come up, they show up really well, and each one works out at pretty much a different colour from the variegated yarn, so it's a really nice little feature. But first I'm going to do a kind of outline, and we're going to be going right down to the smallest crochet stitch, which is double crochet, or in US terms that's single crochet, and we're going to do a round of that in the Lincoln before we do the bobble stitch. Then we'll do another round of the double crochet in the Lincoln again before we go back onto the granny stripes. So this is just a little interlude, if you like, amongst all the granny stripes. So what I've done is I have attached my green yarn into a corner, and I've chained 1, and that is just to take the yarn up to the height of the double crochet. I don't bother particularly about counting this chain 1 as a stitch because it is such a small stitch. So I'm going to go ahead and make my 2 double crochets in the corner. So it's normally for a corner it's 2 double crochets, 2 chains and 2 double crochets. So when we come to the end of this round, we'll forget about that first chain 1 and slip stitch into the top of the first double crochet when we're finishing off. Now all we need to do, it's a bit of a plod, but we just need to go into every stitch with a double crochet stitch. No yarning over this time, you just go into the stitch, pull up the loop, yarn over and pull through the 2 loops. And I would attempt, if I were you, to try to keep your stitch quite verging on the loose as opposed to tight, because you don't want this to pull your work in, being such a small stitch. So just try to keep it nice and even to loose in tension if you can, so you're not pulling it tight. And that's what it looks like. So along to the end of this round, or this side, 2 double crochets, 2 chains, 2 double crochets in the next corner, and down, along and back, and 2 double crochets and 2 chains and slip stitch into the first of the double crochet stitches, and forget that chain 1, and then fasten off. So I'll see you when we're back at this point and ready to start the bobble stitch. Yay, I've got right the way round with my Lincoln, and I have finished off. I think I reckon it's about 124 stitches, including the 2 in each corner. So that's 120 stitches plus 2 plus 2, 124 stitches. Doesn't make an awful lot of difference if you're out by 1 or 2. We'll sort that. So now I'm going to actually start in the corner that's not got all the yarn ends in it. We'll start in a fairly clear corner here, and we're going to be making the bobble stitch with this variegated yarn. And the important thing with the bobble stitch is that it's worked on the reverse of the blanket, not on the front. Why? Because the reverse of the bobble stitch is more bumpy and it shows up better than the front. So we've just done this Lincoln round of double crochet on the reverse. So this time we're not going to turn the blanket, we're going to leave it on the reverse. And what we're going to do is find the corner and attach the yarn, and we're working with treble stitches again, so we will chain 2 for the first treble stitch, and then we're going to put one other treble stitch into that same corner, like that. Now the next stitch, we'll just go into the next stitch, and we're going to start as if we're going to make a treble stitch. So we get to this point where we've got 2 loops left on the hook, and then we're going to yarn over, go back into the same stitch, pull through, and you've got 3 loops on the hook, and then go in again, pull up a loop, pull through 2, and you've got 4 loops on the hook, and then in again, up, pull through 2, and you've got 5 loops on the hook. And at this point we're going to pull through all of these loops and then make a chain to anchor it, and that's a bobble stitch. And you can see already that this is the front of the stitch. it's quite flat, but when you turn it over to the back, there's quite a puffiness about it, and that's what we want. Now, we're not going into the very next stitch. We're going to leave that empty and go into the second one along and start again. So that's 2 loops on the hook, pull through 2, 3 loops on the hook, pull through 2, 4 loops on the hook, pull through 2, 5 loops on the hook, yarn over, pull through all 5 and anchor it with a chain stitch. And you can see how the variegated yarn on the other side is looking really nice and textured and like little baubles. So again, miss the next stitch, into the second stitch along, 2 loops on the hook, 3 loops on the hook, 4 loops on the hook, 5 loops, and then pull through all 5 loops and anchor with a chain stitch. And so what we're going to do is go all the way along until you get to the end. And at the end, it's treble 2, chain 2, treble 2 in the corner, and then round all 4 sides. And I'll be back when I've got to the end and I can tell you exactly how many of these baubles are along each side. So I'll see you at that point. I've just come to the end of my first side using the bobble stitch. It looks very flat because this is the right side of the bobble stitch, and as I said, it's much more textured on the reverse side, which is why we have made sure that the reverse side is going to be the side that's uppermost in the blanket. Right, so what you want to aim for are 61 of these baubles all the way along, and when you come to the corner, you'll find that, let's see, there's my 2 DC in the corner, the chain 2 and the other 2 DC. So I'm going to skip those 2 stitches. I'm not going to go in between them. I'm just going to go straight into the corner. So I've actually skipped over 1, 2, 3 stitches, it won't matter, and I'm going to put 2 trebles, two chains and 2 trebles in the corner, and that's me ready to go round to the next side. So there is a little bit of a gap when you jump over that, but you would have missed a stitch before you put the next one of these in. We don't want to put another one of these in, so that's just all you need to do. You could, I suppose, put an extra treble stitch in there, but that's the risk of throwing off your count for the next part of the blanket, so I will just leave it like that. So we're turning round again into the next side, and we're just going to start actually, I'm changing my mind here. I'm thinking that it might be better to miss the first stitch here and work our first bobble stitch in the second stitch along, and that will push us along one more stitch towards the other end. So I'm going to do that now. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, pull through, and that's quite neat. So what I'll do is I'll work along on this second side and see what it looks like when I come to the other end. I'll pop on and see if it's actually better if we are, because we've missed a stitch here, we will be one stitch further on from when we get to the end of the row. So I'll pop back on when I get to the end of the row and let you see it. So it could be that you're just going to have to forget what I said about this. We'll just see what it looks like. So I'll pop back in a minute. Come to the end of that second side now, and I've checked that I've got 61 clusters. Well, I've got 60 clusters. I've got one more to do. So I'm just going to go in and make my bobble stitch. 3, 4, 5, pull through and chain 1. And I think that's actually better. There are actually 2 stitches left, because if you look, that is 1 double crochet and that's my 2 double crochets in the corner, and this is the chain 2 space. So I'm just going to go over to the chain 2 space and put in 2 trebles, chain 2 and 2 trebles. And although there is a little bit of a space, I don't think it's that much bigger really than the other spaces along the side. So I recommend that when you start your next round, you miss the first stitch. I'm just going to pull, actually the yarn has fallen on the floor now. Yeah, I'm just going to miss that first stitch there and make my first bobble in the second stitch along. See, what I'm doing with this second blanket is I'm not following the original pattern, the original written pattern. I've got the original blanket lying on the floor and I'm looking at it to gauge the pattern, because I don't want to be sort of well, how would you put it? I don't want to be influenced by the old pattern, because I'm writing this afresh. So I'm kind of, it's trial and error as I go along, and that's what's happening with this. But the main thing is 61 bobbles along each side and everything will go smoothly. Did I show you earlier on what the bobbles look like? I think they look fantastic with this variegated yarn. And of course the reverse side is much more textured. So that's me done too. It didn't take me terribly long to do each side. Didn't count it, but it didn't seem too long. And I'll do the other 2 and then I'll be back to show you the next bit, which is, again, is another round of double crochet in the Lincoln. So I'll see you when I get that back to that point. The round of bobbles is now finished, and the next thing to do is to edge it again with a round of double crochet in the Lincoln, single crochet if you're in the US. So double crochet all the way round. Now in my original pattern I said to turn it to do the double crochet round, but I don't think I will. I'm going to be a rebel. I'm going to stay on the same side that I've worked the bobble stitch, which is the reverse of the blanket, because I think it's easier to see these stitches along the top. You can see the little the tops of all these stitches. When you turn it to the other side, they tend to be bent away from you a bit. So I'm going to keep it on the same side to do this round. When all's said and done, this just produces a very narrow border of green on either side of the bobble stitch, and it's just an accent of colour, so I don't think it matters if which side of the blanket we work it on. So attach your Lincoln yarn in any corner, chain 1, and we're not going to count that as a stitch, so I'm going to put 2 double crochets into that corner, 1, 2. And then I'm going to just work along the top of these bobbles. In every stitch that you see along the top, and like I said before when you did the last Lincoln edging, keep it quite loose tension if you can. Now the first one is actually can get hidden by the 2 double crochets that you put in the corner, so just pull it back and there you'll find your first stitch, and then just work along, keeping it nice and even to loose is the tension, so that it doesn't sink in and you don't get any value for it. Now, I'm not going to count these stitches. By and large, you should have the same number on each side. It could be that you miss a stitch by mistake, but I don't think that's going to be much of a problem. I say I'm not going to count it, but I might come back by the time I've gone all the way around and have a stitch count for you. But it won't matter too much when it comes to do the next round of granny stripes, because if you're slightly out in the number of the count by the time you get to the end of a row, you can fudge it or adjust it to fit, and the important thing will be the count of granny stripes that you do. I have it written down somewhere, but when we come to do that I'll tell you what it is. So I'm going to work all the way around with my double crochet. Remember, double crochet is just into the stitch, yarn over, pull through, yarn over, pull through the 2 loops on the hook. So I'll work all the way around, and when I get back here I'll maybe give you a stitch count for you to give you a rough guide for working, and then we'll move on to the granny stripes. I'm back with the stitch count for the double crochet in Lincoln. I've done 2 sides so far, and this is me started the 3rd side, and I counted both sides and they both came out, which is to the same stitch count, which is very satisfying. So I got 130 double crochet stitches between each corner, and that includes the 2 at either end. So it's, let's say, 126 on the actual crochet, and then 2 into the corner at either end makes it 130. So I'm now working along, and I'll have 2 more sides to do. I just wanted to mention that you might find, it's maybe me or maybe, I don't know, but you might find that every so often you have a tight little stitch to work your double crochet into, and just be patient and get through the 2 loops of that small stitch. The next one is loose, and then the next one is usually a tight one. I think that's the one that's been the chain stitch at the end of the bobble stitch, and then a loose one. So you're not going to rattle along the side with this double crochet stitch, because you do have to slow down when you hit a small stitch, and sometimes, like here, it's just a little bit difficult to see. We've just put our double crochet into this really quite big pink stitch, and then there's another big stitch, but this is quite a small one, so you just need to work your hook through the 2 loops to get that stitch in position. But there's always the treat of the bigger stitch immediately after. So you've got a little tight one. I don't know, maybe it's my crocheting. You might find that it's absolutely fine, I'm not sure. But, so I'm going to continue along, and I'll be back when I've got all the way around the 4 sides of the double crochet. Hey, I've finished off this row of Lincoln now. I didn't bother counting the other 2 sides, so I am going to assume there are 130 stitches. And it's time now to move on to 3 rounds of, like this, of granny stripe in the cream once more. I have to say, I am quite happy that this round is now finished. It wasn't the most pleasant round to do because of the tightness of some of the stitches to work into, but it's done and I think it looks really nice. It looks quite florally, I think, with the different coloured bobbles and then the green on either side. It's almost like leaves surrounding flowers. So now it's time to go back to a nice easy stitch to do. So we're going to go in. Oh, I've turned it again. So we're now on the front of the blanket, and the bobbles are showing up nice and textured on this side. So I'm going into the corner and starting my cream yarn, and it's back to treble stitch, of course, because we're going to be doing the granny trebles. So it is chain 2 and then 2 more trebles in that corner, 1, 2, and then we're going to miss 1, 2, and we're going to put 3 trebles in the 3rd stitch along. 1, 2, 3. There we are. That's much nicer to work with. Now I have written down somewhere the stitch count for this, and I'm going to have to go and find it and come back to you. I think it's right now. I think it's 47 or 46. I'll come back. I'll do a count on the other blanket and pop back with the exact number. Just took me 2 minutes to find the list. It's 44 in this round, and then there will be 45 in the next round and 46 in the next round, which is the 3rd round of the cream. Then we're going to be doing a round of charcoal, not charcoal, the batik graphite again, and then a round of Lincoln. So by the time we've done this whole section, the last round should be 48 clusters. Now I'll go on and I'll do my first round, my first side in the cream, and just double check that I've got 44, and I might just then leave it and come back once I have done all 5 rounds of this section, and that will be the end of section what was it, 4? 1, 2, 3, section 4 of the blanket. So I'll see you shortly. This is so satisfying, but I've done my first side of the granny trebles, and I've got exactly 44, which includes the first group of 3 trebles in the corner. So I'll chain 2, put 3 more trebles in the corner, and that will be the first group of 44 for this side. So I'm going to leave you now, and the next time you see me, I'll have done the 5 rounds of granny stripe. Remember, when you're finished with the first round in one colour, you're not going to be finishing that off, you'll just be chaining 2 and turning, and that will mean that for the second round your first corner will be a complete corner because your chain 2 will be on the right hand side. And then when you come to the end of the second round, you'll chain 2 and turn, and the very first group of trebles that you do will actually be 1 space over from the corner. But that was all explained when we did this section. So I'll see you at the end of section 4.